Rising Earth. Constant motion versus acceleration. Hello and welcome. Many people have now come to the realization that the Earth is not a spinning ball flying through the vacuum of space, with a curved horizon, and with up and down facing in all different directions. Instead, they know it is some kind of level plane, with a level horizon, and with a single up and down vector which is perpendicular to the horizontal horizon. There are a multitude of theories and ideas about where we may live and the mechanics of how this realm could function. One topic which is heavily debated is gravity. Why do things go up or down? Almost without question, those who deny the globe theory also deny the theory of gravity, or at least in the way it is taught in schools. A significant percentage of flat earthers believe that gravity is merely the effects of density and buoyancy. They believe things simply go up or down because they are trying to find their natural place in the density gradient. Without deeper consideration, this seems plausible. But just knowing that things go up or down due to their relative density doesn't explain why we have the up and down vector in the first place. Nor does it explain why we have pressure and density gradients. If we take a tank of water, for example, all the water in the tank is the same density. That water is already at equilibrium. So none of the water should be pushing up or down due to any buoyant forces. Therefore, if density and buoyancy were the only factor at play, there will be no increased water pressure the deeper you go because nothing above should be pushing down on anything below. Things displace due to their relative density. But the motion of relative density disequilibrium is not self-causing. It must be the effect of an exterior force. Upwards rising Earth is another theory to explain gravity, but also to explain the vector, and explain the formation of density and pressure gradients. I would like to take this moment to add my disclaimer. I feel quite certain that we do not live on a spinning ball because the globe theory is scientifically impossible. But I think that any claims made beyond that are mostly conjecture. I know how little I truly know, and therefore I am not trying to make any claims. Unlike others who have a somewhat vested interest in these topics, I genuinely have no bias whatsoever. I am just a regular person. I'm not a content creator or an expert of any kind. All I can do is keep an unbiased open mind and try to use common sense and logical reasoning to examine the things which can be physically tested and verified by all, in order to try to come to some kind of conclusions about what may or may not be true. The deeper I delve into the nature of our reality, the more I wonder if the natural laws of physics even apply. Our existence could be supernatural and the workings could well be beyond our comprehension. And so, back to the rising Earth theory. There are many people in the flat Earth community who are opposed to the possibility that Earth could be rising. They have been regurgitating the fixed and stationary Earth mantra for 10 years or more, and this has become one of their core beliefs. For others, it contradicts their religious beliefs and their interpretation of biblical scriptures. Although the Earth is clearly not spinning, it is, in theory, possible that the Earth could be rising upwards. Rising Earth theory has gained traction and a strong borderline fanatical following. Let's have a quick look at why this is the case. Firstly, by utilizing motion, it is possible to take an enclosed system and recreate the vector in any direction you wish. And by utilizing motion, you can also recreate the density and pressure gradients. This gives the theory credence because these phenomena cannot be reproduced in any other way. Secondly, there are a variety of free-fall demonstrations which show that the effects of density and buoyancy and also pressure gradients instantly disappear when an object detaches from the Earth and goes into free fall. These demonstrations appear to indicate that the Earth is moving upwards and that being connected to the rising Earth is the cause for both the effects of density and buoyancy, and also the pressure and density gradients we have here on Earth. I will not go into any more detail about these free-fall demonstrations because this video is already longer than I planned it to be, and all the demonstrations can be found here on YouTube. But suffice to say that so far everything I have covered relating to the rising Earth theory seems plausible and logical. However, this is where I have hit a brick wall. You see, the main proponents of this theory, namely the big man Dell and his protege William, are adamant that the rising Earth is traveling at a constant velocity.
What?
Yes, that's right, a constant velocity and not acceleration. The problem is that the constant velocity part of their rising Earth hypothesis can be easily debunked and makes anyone with a basic understanding of physics reject the entire conversation. This makes me really question why they are so adamant that it must be so. I have had countless discussions in the comments sections of Rising Earth channels, highlighting the problems myself and others have identified with constant motion. Further to that, I have personally exchanged multiple emails with Dell himself and spoken to him in length over the phone. Unfortunately, Dell has refused to concede on a single point and yet has not managed to intellectually defend or substantiate any of his reasoning regarding constant motion. Unfortunately, although I had previously held Dell in high regard, I'm sure he knows better, and so I feel I have no alternative other than to question Dell's integrity and motives for his claims. When I addressed Dell about his integrity, as you may expect, he became very aggressive and blocked me from his email. Then he immediately went on his channel and tried to publicly name and shame me.
You suck!
So, let's get back on track and to the point of this video, which is to discuss whether if the Earth was rising upwards, would it need to be accelerating upwards, or is it possible it could be rising up at a constant speed? Let's examine these three scenarios to see what might be happening when an item is dropped. If these scenarios were all possible to us standing inside the reference frame, visually they would all appear the same. 1. The Earth is stationary and the dropped item accelerates down to meet the Earth at a rate of 9.8 meters per second squared. 2. The Earth and the object are accelerating upwards at 9.8 meters per second squared. When the item is released, the item carries on traveling upwards at a constant velocity, which would be the velocity at which the Earth was traveling at the moment the item was released. Then the Earth continues to accelerate upwards at 9.8 meters per second squared until it meets the object. 3. The Earth and the object are moving upwards at a constant velocity. When the item is dropped, it continues to rise but decelerates at a rate of 9.8 meters per second squared until the Earth meets it. We can quickly eliminate option 1, because as Dell repeatedly states, there is no known mechanism for a pulling force. There is only push. Therefore, on this basis, the dropped item cannot be pulled down to the stationary Earth. For a greater explanation on the difference between pulling and pushing, please once again refer to Dell's channel. Another reason the dropped item cannot be accelerating downwards, which Dell and William constantly stress, is that there is no measurable acceleration in the dropped object. I.e., if an accelerometer is dropped, it will register zero acceleration, and if a bottle containing a mixture of water and air is dropped, there will be no displacement in the bottle. These facts confirm the dropped object is not accelerating. Before we examine and compare the final two scenarios, let's quickly go over Newton's laws of motion, because as you will soon see, this discussion really boils down to who is correct. Is it Newton and his laws of motion, or Dell and his own new version of the laws of motion? Is Newtonian physics, or Daltonian physics correct? Let's take a look at Isaac Newton's laws of motion and inertia. 1. An object at rest will stay at rest, and an object in constant motion will stay in motion unless a force is acting upon it. 2. At any instant, the net force on the object is equal to its acceleration multiplied by its mass. 3. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Let's visualize these principles so we can all understand what Newton is saying about the mechanics of motion and inertia. According to Newton, if we take this stationary object, we need to apply a force to the object to accelerate it. Then, when the force is removed, the object will continue to travel at a constant speed until an opposing force slows the object back down. According to Newton, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. As force is applied to the object to accelerate it, there is an opposing inertial resistance acting against the force. According to Newton, at any given moment in time, the net force being applied to the object is equal to the mass of the object, multiplied by the rate of acceleration. F equals ma. Force equals mass, multiplied by acceleration. The points of Newton's laws of motion which are relevant to this discussion are that acceleration or deceleration are the same thing. They are changes in velocity, just in opposing directions. Only acceleration or deceleration create an inertial resistance. An object traveling at a constant linear velocity, without any forces being applied to it, has no inertial resistance, and is in effect indistinguishable from being stationary. So, with that refresher out the way, let's take a look at scenario number 2, which is Earth accelerating upwards at 9.8 meters per second squared. If this were truly the case, then over time Earth would be traveling at an inconceivable speed, just getting faster and faster, which seems hard to believe, but unfortunately nobody can verify what is outside of the reference frame or what could be pushing the Earth upwards, and so for this scenario and also for the constant motion scenario, we have to just discuss what is plausible from inside the reference frame and not confuse the discussion by worrying about things which cannot be known. If the Earth is accelerating upwards and Newton's laws of motion are correct, then it would actually explain everything perfectly. I am not saying that Earth is definitively accelerating upwards. How could I know that? But I am saying it is plausible, and there are no ways to discredit the possibility from inside the reference frame. Earth accelerating upwards would match and explain what we experience. The acceleration would create the pressure and density gradients in our weight. Then, if we look at free fall, we see that the moment an item is released and the force is removed, it is no longer being accelerated by the Earth, and so it continues to travel at the velocity it was traveling at when released, while the Earth continues to accelerate up at 9.8 meters per second squared until the object hits the ground. This would match perfectly what we see in reality. And because the dropped item in free fall is moving at a constant velocity, it explains why the accelerometer reads 0 in free fall, and why there is no displacement in the bottle. With Earth accelerating upwards, everything adds up fine. Such experiments like the bullet dropped versus bullet fired horizontally, and the bowling ball and feather dropped in a vacuum chamber all work perfectly. Dell's only justification for denying upwards acceleration is that he claims acceleration would mean your weight would constantly increase. This may be the case in Dell's imagination or using Daltonian physics. But with Newton's laws of motion, a constant rate of acceleration produces a constant inertial resistance, or weight if you call it that. Unfortunately for Dell, this increasing weight claim of his is nonsense. So, finally we arrive at scenario 3, Dell's claim in which he says the Earth is rising at a constant velocity, and the item in free fall is decelerating at a rate of 9.8 meters per second squared. Claiming that objects in free fall are decelerating cannot be true for the exact same reason Dell says that objects in free fall cannot be accelerating. That is because acceleration and deceleration are the same thing. They are changes in velocity. An accelerometer will detect any change in velocity, and any change in velocity will cause the water bottle to displace. The water bottle will displace under either acceleration or deceleration 100% of the time. Every time. If there is no displacement, there is no deceleration. Before we continue with the debunking of constant motion, let's quickly look at Daltonian physics. Dell agrees with Newton that it requires a force to accelerate an object, but unlike Newton's laws of motion, which state it also requires a force to decelerate an object in motion, Daltonian physics claims that things just decelerate by themselves without the need for a force. He also claims that all matter, be it solid, liquid, or gas, all decelerate at the same rate, regardless of mass. This is curious because one of Dell's big debunks for gravity when pushing his theory was that there is no known force which can cause uniform acceleration of different states of matter simultaneously, and yet here Dell is claiming uniform simultaneous deceleration of all states of matter, and we have already clarified that acceleration and deceleration are the same thing. How is this possible, you may wonder? Well, according to Newton, inertia is a resistance to changes in velocity, but Daltonian physics has redefined what inertia is. According to Dell, inertia is now an inbuilt resistance to all motion. According to Daltonian physics, all matter which is in motion is trying to return to stationary without any force being required. According to Del, liquids, gases, and solids of any mass will all decelerate by themselves. And they will all decelerate at the exact same uniform rate simultaneously. As I said previously in this video, it all comes down to who is correct. Is it Newton or Del? For those who might still be clinging on to the possibility that Daltonian physics could be a real thing, there are motion tests which definitively prove whose laws of motion are correct. I think Del and William know full well that motion tests debunk their constant motion claim. And this is why they repeatedly perform endless free-fall demonstrations to distract and capture people's attention, but never perform motion tests. If the inquiry was a genuine, unbiased investigation, then performing motion tests would be the next step to follow on from the free-fall demonstrations, and their channels should be full of them. But they know that it would thoroughly debunk constant motion, so instead they loop back to repeating the same old things. If Del or William ever need to confront the topic of motion tests, they assuredly say something to the effect of, "Motion tests are invalid because you can't overcome the reference frame." And just like that, before people get a chance to realize that what they have said doesn't even make sense, they quickly divert away from the subject. It is like the classic magician's misdirection. Nothing to see here. Before we end this video with examples of both vertical and lateral motion tests, let's quickly listen to William say one of his sleight of hand statements used to hide this deceit.
The reason why we have to constantly accelerate to recreate buoyancy is because we're connected to the Earth, which is already in constant motion. And in order to overcome constant motion, you need constant acceleration.
No, Shilliam. Tell the truth, please. The reason why you need to accelerate the item is because acceleration is the only way you can cause displacement. Period. There is not a single example or demonstration showing constant motion creating displacement. And there never will be. That is because it is impossible. So, what is the basis for claiming as constant motion causes displacement in the first place? There is no reasoning or justification whatsoever. Let's start with an example of a lateral motion test. I will try to go slowly here, because this part of the video is particularly important to the discussion. Firstly, let's get one thing straight. You do not overcome the reference frame, you add to it. The reference frame, as Shilliam describes it, is just a linear motion, nothing more. We can call it the primary motion. And by adding secondary motions of a known direction and velocity, you can calculate and determine things about that primary motion. Let's use this simple illustration to explain what I mean. If we start with an object here in position A, and it moves in a straight line at a constant rate to position B, it has simply moved from A to B. As far as the object is concerned, it is exactly the same as if we rotate it 90 degrees like this. It is still just moving in a straight line from A to B. The object doesn't care about its orientation. Looking at this primary vertical motion from our example, we see that the red line denotes the vector or direction of travel. If we take that primary motion and simultaneously add the second lateral perpendicular motion to it, we get this. Neither the initial primary motion nor the additional secondary motion are superior. They simply combine to create a new vector or direction of travel. The object does not care if the vector is created from a single motion or a combination of two motions. Once again, it is simply traveling from A to B. In this example, the vertical and horizontal motions are both at the same velocity, so the new vector will be at 45 degrees relative to them. If we were to keep the vertical motion the same speed, but half the speed of the horizontal motion, the object would still travel in a straight line from A to B. However, the new direction of travel would be at 22.5 degrees. The plumb bob shows us the direction of travel. If it is to be believed that vertical constant motion affects the plumb bob, then horizontal constant motion must also affect the plumb bob. You cannot have it only work in one direction. But it doesn't matter how fast you travel horizontally. If the velocity is constant, the plumb bob will always hang down vertically in its original position. This definitively proves that constant motion is not the cause of the vector. However, if you accelerate at constant rate horizontally, the plumb bob will show the new vector. And if you accelerate horizontally at 9.8 meters per second squared, the plumb bob will hang fixed at 45 degrees. This absolutely proves Newtonian physics correct, and it proves that the Earth must be accelerating. Hang a plumb bob from your car rear view mirror next time you go for a drive and try it for yourself. You cannot argue with this. Now for the final nail in the coffin, I'll highlight an example of adding vertical motion. For this test, we are going to look at your weight. We have two claimed causes for your weight. We have constant motion, and we have acceleration. With the constant motion claim, your weight must be proportional to the velocity. This means that if you increase the velocity of the upwards motion, your weight must also increase. With the acceleration claim, your weight must be proportional to the rate of acceleration. This means that an increase in the rate of acceleration will increase your weight. For this vertical test, we will use an elevator and some weighing scales. The elevator is perfect because it first accelerates, then it travels at a constant velocity, then it decelerates. So we get to test everything in one go. The passenger weighs 164 pounds, but as the elevator accelerates upwards, the weight increases. Then the elevator settles at a constant velocity and the passenger's weight returns to its original weight of 164 pounds, proving that increasing the upwards velocity has no effect on weight. Then finally, the elevator decelerates, and the passenger's weight decreases. This simple test clearly shows that acceleration causes weight, and constant motion has no effect on weight whatsoever. Once again, this thoroughly debunks the constant motion claim. You cannot argue it. So what are the conclusions? Earth accelerating upwards at 9.8 meters per second squared is perfectly plausible. It is in agreement with experiments, and from inside the reference frame it can't be refuted. The constant motion claim and its required deceleration are nothing more than pseudoscience. The theory is provably incorrect and can be debunked in numerous ways. I have no idea what the motive could be for pushing the constant motion claim. I could speculate that perhaps the original Flat Earth Society claim of upwards acceleration was the truth in plain sight. Perhaps this new constant motion spin has been put out there to cause further division in the flat Earth community and to discredit upwards motion. Who knows? As I said in the disclaimer, I can't say what is definitely true, but I can say that constant motion is provably false. It is amazing that if you say something with enough confidence and conviction, and if you repeat it enough times, then people will believe it. So what now? Making this video will not change anything. Big Del will no doubt get angry, shout a lot, then double and treble down and get right back to repeating his sales pitch. But I know what you're playing at, Del, and you know that I know, and that's enough for me, big man.